Greetings, everyone. Hope all of you are having an absolutely fantastic day. I have finally finished all of the builds for my dogmatic run, and now it's time to talk about the party members I'm going to use for our heretic run. And I wanted to start it with Jay. Seems like there's not a lot of builds online specifically regarding her, and it's probably because she's kind of a middle of the road character. She's an officer, but you really don't want her to be your primary officer. She can use double weapons better than you would be able to, technically, from an AP standpoint, but from a pound for pound damage standpoint, she's not really going to be a heavy hitter for you the way Argenta and Uralet can. Where she does really excel more than any other party member is in skills, so it's still very, very valuable to have her on the team. Let's go ahead and dig through it. So she's automatically going to come with Aldari and Drukhari weapon proficiency, which is actually pretty cool because most of your party members don't come with both. So it's going to let her use some weapons that most of your crew probably isn't able to. Her home world is Imperial World, and so she has Humanity's Finest, and she's taken that +10 bonus into Fellowship. And then she also comes with Gunslinger, which allows her, when she's using weapons in both hands, after she attacks with one hand, she can make an attack with the second hand that does not cost any additional action points. This is very, very nice, and there is no way for your character to get this particular talent, so it gives her something that's unique. But again, unfortunately, she's not really built well for damage, so you're not really going to be able to make use of this. What you are going to be able to make use of is Never Play Fair, and this allows her to use either Fellowship or Intelligence for intelligence-based skills, whichever one is higher. And additionally, she can re-roll failed commerce test attempts. This all means that when you increase Fellowship, not only will you get more ranks in commerce, coercion, and other persuasion-related skills, but you're also going to get more ranks in tech use, logic, lore xenos, and other very, very valuable skills to have. But that's not where it ends, because she also has Cold Trader's Acumen. This is going to give her a bonus in several really, really crucial skills based upon your reputation level with certain vendors. And as you progress through the game, some of these reputation levels can get very, very high, so it can create massive bonuses for some skills. For example, in Lore Imperium, you'll see Cold Trader's Acumen is providing a +28 value for her. So really, really nice. And again, it just leans into she is a monster skill monkey for your squad. All right, that's everything I wanted to cover regarding the features. So let's get into the archetype. Similar to Ulfar, you can change nothing about her first archetype. Officer is completely locked in. Unfortunately, it just is what it is. With all that being said, let's dive into it. First, you're going to get Voice of Command. This is going to increase the characteristics for one character by an amount that scales with your Fellowship bonus, and it'll do that for 1 round. Afterwards, you cannot use Voice of Command on that character again for 2 rounds. So this is a really, really nice way to give one particular character an immediate buff. Awesome to have. Next up, she's going to increase Commerce. Terrible. Terrible. Commerce is not a critical skill like Persuasion, Coercion, or Lore Imperium. On top of that, she already gets the ability to re-roll commerce tests, which means even more, she doesn't need crazy high ranks in it. So all the way around, it would be preferable for her to focus on something else, but that's not the situation. Next up, she's going to get Bring It Down, which allows you to give one character an extra turn with action points that scale with your Fellowship bonus, but no movement points. This is a monster ability to have that can potentially make it, if you can chain it with another officer, it could potentially bring about a situation where enemies never even get to act in combat. So it's absolutely fantastic to have an officer on the team and to have someone capable of using Bring It Down. Speaking of which, at level 4, you're going to get Finest Hour, which is Bring It Down on steroids. It's going to allow you to give an ally an extra turn with 4 action points and movement points. So you'll notice if you look at some of the advanced archetypes, a lot of them have an ability that allow you to get in another attack for a lesser amount of damage. If you have someone, or preferably multiple people on the team, who can use Finest Hour, you don't need to pick up those abilities, because all you do is put Finest Hour on that particular character, and then they can attack over and over again with their most powerful attack. So just absolutely, you want at least one person on the team who's capable of using this. Great to have. On that same level, she's going to take the commanding voice talent. It's going to increase the range of voice of command by 6, and it's going to increase the range of officer abilities by 3. This is absolutely a talent you want your officer to have. Once you've put voice of command on a character, you can use all the other officer abilities at any distance. So it's really nice to be able to put this on early, and then everything else is a no-brainer. So getting that +6 range, absolutely crucial. This is great. Next on the list, she's going to increase fellowship. This is great. Fellowship is her primary characteristic. You want to pump that as high as possible. Next up, she's going to increase nimble, which is going to give her a 10% bonus to dodge. This is okay. Honestly, you're not going to be able to put any points into agility. You're not going to get armor or dodge all that high. So investing into dodge as if you're really going to gain from this so early doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but it's there, so we'll take it. Next up, she's going to take lasting impression, and this is going to allow half of the bonuses granted by voice of command to remain until the end of combat. This is fantastic because, like I said before, voice of command expires after 1 round, and then you cannot use it again for 2 rounds, which could potentially mean that a character you really want to be buffed will go at least 1 round with no buffs. Lasting impression ensures that at least part of that buff remains with the character at all times. Great stuff. And then she's going to take another bonus into fellowship. Again, this is fantastic. Next up, she's going to take move. So remember, bring it down gives you action points but no move points, which could potentially be a problem if your damage dealer needs to be in a certain angle, a certain position in order to do the maximum amount of damage. Move allows you to move that character first, and then you can use bring it down to make the most out of that particular opportunity. So this is definitely nice to have. Next up, she takes swift movements, which is going to give her 2 movement points. This is terrible. Jay doesn't need to move around a lot. She's not the one dealing damage. She's not the one who needs to be closer to enemies. And so giving her 2 movement points doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Next up is March. When Jay uses an ability that forces an ally to move, she is going to gain movement points equal to half the distance the target moved. And if it happens on another character's turn, then she will gain these movement points on her next turn. Again, she doesn't need extra movement points, and she certainly doesn't need to be using archetype talents in order to get more movement points, so this is another terrible pickup. Once again, she invests in commerce, and it doesn't really help us. And then for her first Finest Hour upgrade, she's going to take the first option, which is going to allow the target to deal additional damage that scales with her fellowship bonus. And until the end of combat, that target is going to gain the effect of voice of command. This is absolutely a fantastic upgrade. You'll be glad she's taken this. Next up, she's going to increase Lower Imperium, which is, again, not a good choice. Lower Imperium is a very important talent, so you definitely want somebody who covers this, but most likely Jay is going to be the person covering your conversation-related skills, so it would be much more preferable that this slot be taken for persuasion or coercion. Unfortunately, she's taking Lower Imperium, so you just got to roll with it. Next up, she's going to increase Ballistic skill. This is another slot that doesn't really help you. Again, her ability to use pistols is severely limited because she doesn't get a whole lot of talents that pump up the amount of damage that she's able to do. So it's going to be much more preferable for a character like Uralet or Genta or even Heinrichs to be your main damage dealer, not Jay. So sticking a bunch of points into ballistic skill, at the very least, it should be your last choice. It would be preferable for these points to go into intelligence in anticipation of her becoming a grand strategist, but it is what it is. Next, she takes Leader's Assault. When she makes an attack, she's going to gain +5 fellowship until the end of combat. Again, this would be useful if she was great for attacking, but she's not, so it doesn't really help you. And she takes another point in ballistic skill. Again, it doesn't help you here. Next up is Take Aim. So this is going to allow a target's next attack to ignore cover, and it will have double the effective distance. If the target is under voice of command, the attack will ignore enemy dodge, and the damage from the attack cannot be reduced below an amount that scales with your fellowship bonus for any reason. This would be fantastic to put on Jay because most of her pistols are going to have a range from anywhere to 5 to 7 cells, which is very, very short. For example, a sniper rifle, I think the one I have right now, it has a range of 18 cells. So this would allow her to stay way in the back and still be able to fire on enemies. But officers cannot use take aim on themselves. They have to use it on another character. So you would have to have another officer if you wanted to try to use this on her. Next up, she's going to take characteristic training ballistic skills. So you take a characteristic training option when you want to be able to increase a characteristic that you believe is not going to be available with the next archetype you're going to select. Or you take it because there are no other good options and you just want a small bonus to a particular characteristic. Neither of those situations is the case here. On your next archetype, you're absolutely going to be able to increase ballistic skill, and it's too early in the game for you to have run out of good common talents to pick up, so I don't like this option at all. Next up is heroism. Whenever a heroic act is used in combat by any character, your next attack will cost 0 action points. If you were going to use Jay as a character who attacked on a regular basis, this would be fantastic. And I suppose you could pull out the pistols every so often. But once again, you are going to want to focus on someone else like Argenta or Urilet as your main damage dealer. And Rogue Trader is kind of the game where if you set things up right, there should only really need to be one main damage dealer because that individual should wipe out the entire field. So maybe sometimes Jay will get to use this, especially early game, but by the time you get to like the middle of Act 2, you should be wiping the floor with whoever is really the one dishing out the damage, and this isn't going to be all that useful for you. And then once again, she picks up Lore Imperium. And then next up, she's going to pick up willpower. Why? Have no clue. No clue whatsoever. Willpower does not factor into anything else that she has, and it certainly isn't going to factor into our overall build, so this is a waste. And speaking of a waste, she's also going to take characteristic training fellowship. Once again, all of the archetypes we're going into will allow her to continue increasing fellowship. Is the +5 bonus bad? No, it's not bad, but there are certainly better options right now at this point in the game, so it just doesn't make sense for her to take this. But that's not even the worst part. The absolute worst travesty, or maybe the second worst travesty of this entire build, is the fact that the last upgrade she takes for Finest Hour is the one that grants temporary wounds, which means you do not have the option that allows the target to get additional action and movement points every time they kill during their extra turn, which is a massive, massive miss on this overall build and means that Jay is really not the person you want to be your main officer. You really want a second officer who's going to give you the very best that Finest Hour can give. And on top of that, potentially even bigger than the loss here, some of you who have played through the game and have used an officer before are probably already realizing there's a major, major talent that is missing from this list. And that Seize the Initiative, which allows an officer to go first before anybody else in combat. This is a massive part of any officer build, and Jay is completely missing it. Even worse, I realized something here that I never realized before. Apparently, all talents are not available when you become an archetype. So I thought once you become an archetype for your first tier archetype talents, you could go ahead and pick up Seize the Initiative, but that's apparently not the case. It's not listed here at all. I don't know how the decision gets made about what talents are and are not in this list, but basically Jay does not have access to Seize the Initiative in any way, shape, form, or fashion, which is a massive loss because, again, the way Rogue Trader works, you want to stack, bring it down, and momentum very, very early so that you can put Finest Hour on whoever is your major damage dealer and allow them to absolutely go to town and mow down the vast majority of enemies. This is critical to really being effective in combat. Having an officer who doesn't have Seize the Initiative and is not going to be increasing agility, so her initiative is going to be very, very low, is extremely counterproductive and puts you in a situation where, as far as I'm concerned, there's really only one choice for you to upgrade into, and that's Grand Strategist. Because with combat tactics, you're automatically going to be allowed to go first, which is going to replace the functionality that Seize the Initiative would usually provide you. Now, when you become a Grand Strategist, you're going to get these three fields, and you'll be able to lay them down during combat. Two of them are 5x2 cells, and then one of them is 4x4. So they are large, but not so large that you're just going to be able to hit all of the enemies in a particular area. So you need to strategically use these. And there are two of them that Jay will rely on heavily. First, she's going to rely on rear, and this is going to give you a bonus to range damage that scales with your intelligence bonus, a bonus to over penetration that scales with fellowship, and a bonus to critical hit chance that scales with fellowship. So she's going to use this in the back with her and whoever your other range specialist is, whether it's Agenta or Urilet or Pascal or whoever. She's going to use this to make sure that particular character can do the maximum amount of damage. And then she's also going to place a frontline area because it's going to provide a bonus to armor that scales with her intelligence bonus, but this only really matters if you're heavily using Abelard or maybe to a lesser degree Ulfar. What matters far more is that for all enemies, it's going to massively increase the damage they take from any source, and this amount scales with her fellowship bonus. So you want to place the rear bonus where you and your major range damage dealer are standing, and then place the frontline field in whatever area there is a massive amount of enemies standing. And then once you get that initial turn, use Bring It Down on your major range damage dealer and allow them to mow down everybody standing here. So with that being said, let's dive into the build. The first one you want to pick up is Combat Locust Stratagem. It's going to allow you to double the bonus for one of your combat areas. And obviously we want to put that on the rear area so that our allies in the back line are able to do as much damage as possible. It may sound good to use this on the front line area, but the problem is A, enemies can move, and B, once again, it's not large enough where you can just put all the enemies into that area. So there will come a point when that area that you have selected is no longer useful. Whereas if you put it on the rear area, as long as your damage dealers are standing there, those bonuses will count and it'll continue helping out your team. Then the first talent we want to pick up is Diversion Zone. When you use a stratagem on a rear area, it also makes the allies in that area the enemy's lowest priority targets for one round. So when we're dealing all of this crazy damage, obviously we don't want enemies running in and blowing up those characters. This is going to help ensure that they stay safe. It's absolutely essential. At level 3, we're going to get Taken Hold, but I'm not even going to bother talking about it because you never want to use it. It's always going to be a better option to use your heroic act from an officer, even though it doesn't have the right upgrades. On the next level, she's going to get an AP increase of 1. This is fantastic. It's going to help her action economy. And then for the first time, we get to increase characteristics. So obviously, we're going to start with Fellowship. It is the most important characteristic for her. Then after that, we're going to go with Intelligence because it's going to help with some of the things that we're doing as a Grand Strategist. And then finally, you can either go with Toughness to increase her hit points, or Ballistic Skill if you wanted to make sure she's a little more effective with pistols, or you could even go the Perception route if you wanted to upgrade her ability to use pistols in a different way. Me personally, I'm going to go with Toughness because again, I feel like she's best served as strictly a buffer and a skill monkey. For your next talent, pick up Blurred Locust. So when you use the Combat Locust Stratagem, it's going to double the bonuses for one area, but all other tactical areas are discharged and cannot be used that turn. Blurred Locust allows you to recreate one of the areas. So it's going to allow you to use this ability, but still maintain two areas at the same time. Great stuff. For your next ability, pick up Kill Zone Strategy. So this is going to force all enemies within a particular zone to re-roll successful dodge and parry tests against attacks. And any enemies that suffer damage and are left with less wounds than twice your intelligence and fellowship bonus combined are automatically killed. This is going to be fantastic to use on your frontline zone, where you should be putting in the maximum amount of enemies. Bonus points if you have Cassia on your team and can use her to herd as many enemies into that area as possible. And now you can choose what skill you want to increase. For me, it's always going to come down to either persuasion or coercion. If J is the main one leveling fellowship for you. In this particular run, I'm going heretic, so coercion is going to be more important to me. If I was doing another disposition, then persuasion is probably where I would go. Next, take Inescapable Zone. So it's going to change the kill zone stratagem ability that we just took and add a -15 penalty to the rerolls that enemies are forced to make, making it even more difficult for enemies in that zone to escape attacks. This is absolutely going to make your frontline combat zone a boss killer. Next up, we can't increase fellowship anymore, so go ahead and increase intelligence. And for your common talent, I would take It Will Not Die, which is going to increase your wounds by half of the character's level rounded out, help to ensure she's got a little bit more tankiness. For your next talent, take Point of Interest, which is going to increase the bonuses from your combat tactics areas by a percentage amount equal to half of your intelligence and fellowship bonuses added together if the area was not moved for 2 rounds. Again, most of the time, combat should be done in the first round, but for those times where it goes longer, this is definitely going to be nice. For your next talent, take Strategic Offensive. Every enemy killed in the frontline area is going to increase all bonuses of combat tactics areas by +1 until the end of combat. You should be killing a ton of enemies in that area, so this is great to have. For your next ability, take the Trench Line Stratagem. So for 1 round, all allies in that area are going to get a percentage bonus to cover efficiency equal to your intelligence and fellowship bonuses added together, and they're going to be able to reroll all failed characteristic tests. Additionally, cover in the area does not suffer any damage. Again, you shouldn't be worrying about this because especially by this point, you should be wiping out the vast majority of enemies before they can act. But in the case where that's not possible, you'll definitely want to have this. For your next talent, take Ready to Serve, which is going to trigger when you are affected by an ally's non-damaging ability, or more importantly, when you use such an ability, and it's going to increase the character's resolve by an amount equal to half your fellowship bonus for 1 round. Definitely nice to have. For your next talent, I would go with base skill logic. So looking at the skills, you're automatically going to increase tech use, and Cold Trader's acumen is going to increase it as well. Same with Lore Imperium and same with Persuasion. You're going to manually increase coercion. So the only critical skill that I feel like you might want to manually put some points into is logic, which can have very high checks in order for you to be able to succeed. And I think it's worth getting the base and advanced versions of that particular skill. Next up, you can't increase fellowship or intelligence anymore, so personally I go with toughness. And then for the next talent, I would take Grenadier. There's a lot of great grenades, especially at this point in the game, so being able to throw one for free is really going to help you. After that, pick up Advanced Skill Logic. All right, now we've come to Exemplar, and at this point, Jay is just about as good a skill monkey and buff bot as she's going to be able to be. Exemplar is just going to help you flesh out some of the things you can do a little bit more, but it's not really going to let you go crazy. Again, I feel like you would have had to have another officer who serves as your main one for the team, along with another main damage dealer. So you're probably not going to change that up at this point, but it's still going to allow her to do some interesting things. As always, in the description, there's a link to her spreadsheet, along with the links to my guides going over the mechanics for both Grand Strategist and Officer, if you need that additional information. The only thing that I'll mention here is I definitely feel like the first option you should take is Eager Subordinates, which is going to allow characters that she gives extra turns to deal 15% more damage. Very nice. All right, and finally, let's go over the gear that I have for Jay. Keep in mind, this was not a game where I actually used Jay as one of my party members. I'm still very early in my heretic run, so this is all theoretical about the things that I would probably put on her to make her as effective as possible. So for the headgear, she's got Commander's Monocle. I'm sorry. And also keep in mind, my main character is of course still going to be Lord Highlander. So he's going to have the main gear that I would use for an officer. When I actually finish the game, I'll have a reflections video where I actually update some of those builds and then go over what are some of the new items that I put on my character that I felt like fit with the final version of them. But this is basically what I would put on her as my secondary officer. So for the monocle, she's got the voice of command, commander's monocle, which ensures that ability when allies make an attack during an extra turn. This attack deals an additional 3 times her fellowship bonus damage. Very, very nice. And then for the necklace, she's got invigorating resolve. Whenever the wearer and allies in a 2-cell radius gain momentum, they also gain an equal amount of temporary wounds. Remember, she should be closely tied with your best ranged damage dealer. They're going to be standing in the same field. And so this is going to help ensure that that character stays on their feet. For armor, she's got the pirate chainmail, 50% armor. Actually, I would change this, probably give her some light armor that isn't going to interrupt her dodge. But again, I was just kind of playing around with that character. For the first ring slot, she's got commander notes. Whenever she uses the combat locus, which is usually going to double the benefits of a particular field, instead, the bonuses are going to be multiplied by 4, which is absolutely fantastic. It's going to really help your ranged character to deal out the damage. And then for a second ring slot, she's got the stinger ring. It's going to do up to 21 damage and has 100% armor penetration. But more importantly, the target must pass a toughness resistance test or become stunned for 1 round. So this is a nice way to potentially lay down a really nasty enemy that we don't want to be able to just unload on us. Then she also has a stabilizer's bracers. The wearer gains a +10 to ballistic skill and +25% critical damage. So every so often when I decide it really makes sense for her to use her blasters, I can go ahead and at least be competent with them. And then for the cape, the one she has requires Iconoclast Follower. Each heroic act used in battle increases the wearer's dodge by 20% until the end of combat, max 60%. She can easily max this out. By the time you get to the middle of Act 2, you should just be popping out heroic acts left and right. So definitely, it's nice for her to have this. It looks like I was playing around too much and accidentally deleted the boots. I'm not sure what I would use for boots, so I'll just show what I have for my main character. He's got the Commissar boots. Whenever the wearer chooses an ally as a target of their ability, the wearer immediately gains half of their fellowship bonus as movement points. And then the target ally gains half of your fellowship bonus as movement points at the start of this ally's next turn. So just very nice. And honestly, with this, you could respec him and take out move and take a different ability instead. So great stuff. And then for her pistols, the first one, she's got the Desolation pistol. So it's going to do up to 35 damage. It's got a range of 30 and it's got 30 damage reduction. And then it sprays in a line for 2 AP. And every hit from this pistol inflicts 1 stack of melting, which is going to reduce deflection by 1 and armor by 10%. And then her second pistol is the Needle pistol. It's going to do up to 20 damage, but it's got 30% armor penetration, range of 5. And it's a toxic needle. So it's very nice. There might be some other nice pistol options probably that I can put in here as well. There is one thing that I might do differently if I decided I really wanted to try to make her damage focused. So if you notice all of the pistols, again, they're going to have a range of between 5 to 7, which is really not viable for a character you want to be your main ranged damage dealer, because you basically want to be able to wipe out everybody on the field in one go. So you need at least the capabilities of a sniper. I could probably do the same thing for her that I did with Argenta, which is give her this blessed bolter casing, which you find in the middle of Act 2. So it's relatively early in the game, but it's going to cause all single attacks with bolter weapons to automatically hit the target. And you absolutely find multiple bolter pistols while you're going through your run. So you could potentially give Jay bolter proficiency and then give her 2 bolter pistols and then put this in her necklace slot, and then all of a sudden she can reach anybody on the field and she becomes significantly more viable as your main range damage specialist. Again, she's not going to be able to pump out as much damage as Argenta or Uralette, But frankly, if you're only playing on normal or some difficulty that's close to that, she probably doesn't need to. So if you just want to play around and have fun, I think that would probably be a great way to make her more viable. But anyway, those are my thoughts regarding Jay and the best way to use her. Absolutely. Let me know your comments down below. Looking forward to your feedback, and I'll see you all in the next video. Take care.